Welcome to the Golfish Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Goodman. Every week on the show, we're going to bring you fascinating interviews with the people behind the players of the PGA, LPGA, Champions Tour, and beyond. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a minute of the action. This week, we have JJ VanWezenbeeck, the Director of Golf Clubs and Tour Representative for Titleist. JJ and I discuss what it's like behind the scenes at tour events, how the players choose their clubs, how you can experience the Titleist Performance Institute, and so much more. I learned so much during this episode, from the day-to-day of the practice rounds to the importance of matching the clubs with specific golf balls. If you wanted an insider's look into one of golf's top brands, then this episode's for you. Let's get started. Hey, JJ, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me on the Golfish Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we are super excited to chat with you today about all things golf clubs, on the course, golf balls, everything. So tell us who you are, where you're from, what your background is, and kind of how we got here.
Yeah, so I'm the director of the PGA Tour for Titleist Golf Clubs. So I've been with the Acushnet brand for 14 years now. My background is I was a professional golf management major at Penn State. I grew up in the Northeast and was working at a golf club and had the lucky opportunity to be involved in fitting programs and be exposed to some early versions of launch monitors and radar launch monitors that were really just kind of coming about at the time. And I had a really great member who was very involved in helping develop some of these, as well as some other brands, and was able to meet some people in Acushnet and moved to California and was able to start in different fitting programs with them, and then started to get exposed to tour and kind of just moved from there to where I am today. That's awesome. How cool. So where were you, where did you grow up in the Northeast? I grew up in Endicott, New York. So if you watch the Champions Tour here in a week or two at the Dick's Sporting Goods Open, I grew up 2 blocks from there. Oh, that's awesome. That'll be fun. Do you get to go to that event, or are you primarily focused on PGA Tour? I'm primarily focused on PGA Tour. So Scott Cuppett, our Champions Tour rep, is going to get to enjoy some speedies and enjoy the Northeast. That's awesome. So how long have you been with Titleist or Acushnet? So it's been 14 years now. So I originally started with the Cobra brand when they were under the Acushnet umbrella, and then transitioned to the Titleist brand from there. Okay, awesome. So how did you, just in general, become interested in golf? So growing up near a PGA Tour event, so when I was a kid, the BC Open was that event, and it was a September event, and it was right before the Ryder Cup. It was before some of the changes, and when you're that close to that level of golf, it becomes very interesting, and seeing what these players are able to do, and you see players like Fred Couples win and John Daly win, it gets really exciting, and so I had an opportunity to be able to play a little bit through high school and get involved in it, and then going to Penn State and someone saying, well, you can actually major in golf. Right. And being exposed to the professional golf management program, and on a program like that being able to expose you with such width. You spend time with the turfgrass team, you work private clubs, you do internships at public clubs. So I was able to see a lot of the parts of the business, and then ending up at a facility that had a really big push in instruction as well as club fitting, just allowed me to kind of find the niche that I really, really enjoyed. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you were surprised that there was a major in PGA management, because we had Dave Nostalski on last episode, and he has that, and I had no idea either. I was like, man, I really missed my calling in college. Yeah, so I'm getting up there a little bit in years. So when I went, there was actually 4 universities, where now I believe there's 20 some odd universities. But when I was in college, there was only 4 nationwide universities accredited with the PGA of America. So it was an exciting opportunity to be able to get a degree through Penn State as well as work with the PGA of America simultaneously. And it was an interesting accreditation program while you're getting a 4-year degree from a school like Penn State.
So did you choose Penn State and then just happen upon the degree, or did you find the degree and say, I'm going to leave New York, go to Penn State, like this is going to be the direction I'm going?
Well, I had dreams of designing a golf course when I went to Penn State. They have a wonderful landscape architecture program as well as turf grass program, and I'm like, I'm gonna design golf courses. It turns out I'm not a very good artistic person, and so it was. It might be a little easier to use numbers and work on spreadsheets and interpersonal skills than design golf courses. So I pivoted once I was there.
That's so cool, though, that you were able to do that and not have to transfer. I feel like so many times people find these things out and it's like, oh, I just chose the wrong university and now I have to move halfway across the country to get that. It's really fortunate that we have something like that just in the Midwest in general. That's really cool. So you have been, how long have you been working specifically at tour events? I know you've been with them for 14 years, but when did you start going to the tour events?
So I got very lucky early on. I was doing a lot of consumer fittings and things like that, and I was able to kind of help as a tech on the Cobra Tour van, being able to assist at a couple of events and help build and help drive the Cobra Tour van and move it to event and just kind of get exposure on a smaller level. And then when I moved from there, I actually started driving the Cobra Tour van and building full time. Then I moved from there to what at that time was the Nationwide Tour, then became Web.com, and now is Korn Ferry Tour as a representative, and then went back to the PGA Tour for about 4 years now, full time.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So when you're like driving to these events or going to these events in general and you're with a tour van, I've heard a lot about these tour vans and just how high tech they are and what kind of access you have. What is your responsibility when you're at the event?
So our biggest job with myself and my team is our job is to get our players that use our product in the best position to win on Sunday. So it can vary dramatically from player to player and course to course and facility to facility. It can range from everything of, hey, the airline lost my clubs, I have nothing to play with, let's start over, to my umbrella broke. Our job is that and everything in between.
Okay.
A really good week for us is really maintenance stuff, grips, loft lies. If we've done a good job in the off season with our players and getting them properly fit, getting everything dialed in, making them feel really good about their equipment for the best chance for success, my goal is make sure their loft lies are perfect, make sure their grips are fresh, and they're ready to go. Other players, will be making some swing changes throughout the year, and they might say, hey, all of a sudden I'm kind of noticing my driver's not spinning enough. Can we take a look at it? And we're going to move through that process. Other times we're launching product and we're exposing them to some of the new exciting stuff we have, like our T-Series irons and our new TS hybrids. And then other times it might be something very specific to the golf course. Aaron Dill around majors. He's runs our Wedges on tour. He'll spend a lot of time doing different grinds and bounces and things like that with our players because there might be unique course setups. A place like Augusta National, a place like an Open Championship that might be a little firmer than what they're used to, those types of things. So it's going to be a kind of very player-to-player, week-to-week.
So how often, as a pro player, like how often are they having to get their grips adjusted or redone? Is that like in every tournament?
Not every tournament, but we have one player who doesn't use a glove. He literally will change them every 2 to 3 events. Obviously not using a glove, he doesn't have that benefit that like a FootJoy glove is going to give you. Where we have other players that are probably twice a year, and again everything in between. We have a couple of our top players that they've kind of become. I don't want to say superstitious, but they do it at every major. So every major, they'll bring their clubs in, and it's fresh grips for majors. with the new schedule, it kind of works out where it's every month they're getting a new grip. One thing I think the average person forgets is these guys practice a lot. So if you think of how often you're hitting balls and things like that, these guys are doing that, 6-7 days a week a lot of times. And then the other time, their caddies are always trying to make sure, sunscreen and sweat are off the grip, so they're taking a towel of water to them, so now they're drying out and things like that. So you always want to remove variables for these guys. They're so good, and their margin for error is so small that anything we can do to give them the smallest edge, we're going to do. Yeah,
absolutely. As a rec player, is there a recommendation for how often we should change our grips?
I think a lot of the grip companies have some guidelines on how often you play and things like that. But I think the biggest thing to probably do is if you walk into a golf shop and you pick up a grip and it feels really tacky compared to yours, you're probably overdue.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's the thing is a lot of people, if you live in Arizona or something like that and drier, even if you aren't playing a lot, you're in a situation when those are drying out. So I think it's always a good thing, in that maintenance, just like you're going to sharpen your skis every year or getting them tuned. It's probably not a bad way to start your season with something fresh.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when you're on tour with the players, how often are you working one-on-one with the players or even at the Titleist shop in California? How often are you working one-on-one with players versus working like with Jordan and his coach? I know they're kind of like a team, so they're always together on that stuff. But do you have other players where it's just like they come in by themselves and are working with you?
So, yeah, we have lots of players that'll come in by themselves, but we always are part of a team. None of these players are teeing it up by themselves. They might have a caddy, they have a swing coach, they have a fitness person. We're always part of team fill in the blank. Team Thomas is we want to make sure if I'm making a club recommendation or we're looking at things that Mike Thomas's dad, it's working in association with what they're working on. I don't want to bring them down a bad path and away from what they're working on. At the same time, Jimmy Johnson, his caddy, can give me a pretty unedited version of what they're seeing on golf course. So we'll look at his statistics. We'll hear from Jimmy. We'll hear from Mike. We'll hear from Justin. Justin's going to be the ultimate stamp of approval on that feels good, that flies good, numbers on the launch monitor are great, all of our specs look great, and we're going to go forward from that with that golf club. So they're always going to be the CEO of that project, but we always want to involve as much of their team as we can, just from a standpoint as it just gives us a cohesive product. Is we all want Justin or Patrick Cantlay or Jordan Spieth to play as best as they can, and by involving everybody that is going to affect that final product, it lets the player be in the best possible situation.
How, as you're talking to these teams then, and as you are part of the team, how often are you seeing players change what's in their bag? Or does that does that depend on the player?
It really is player dependent. We have some players that'll stay in certain shafts for a very, very long time. We have other players that if it's new and different, they want to try it, and they're very adaptive to different situations. So, we always want to work. Part of the key is learning all your players' personalities and their wants and dislikes. What is perfect for one guy and what one guy likes to feel in a golf shaft or seeing ahead is not the other players. And part of your long-term goal when working with these players is your ability to understand the needs and wants of the different players. So the type of head they want to look at, the sound they want to hear off the face, the type of shaft they like the feel of, the window they like to see the golf ball in, the way they like to shape the shot. Those are all things you got to work with. And some players, once they find that, they're kind of really set, and you kind of stay in a really narrow area. I think you see the adoption of Ts drivers. A lot of these guys always like farther, but you want to be able to work within the sound and feel parameters for them. And then we have some guys that, they're always looking for an edge. What's new? What's different? Hey, this shaft, let's try it, making swing changes on their own. Okay, now we're adjusting settings or lofts or CG and those types of things.
So I have a question, just for clarification. When you're talking about the window they like to see it in, what does that mean?
So that's how high the ball is off the ground. So we have some players that grew up in Texas and they are used to a little lower window. They might want to see the ball 90 feet off the ground with a driver. And then we have other players just trying to maximize carry and distance, who that ball might be 115 feet off the ground. So that visual window that when a player looks up, they expect a golf ball to be somewhere.
Got it. Okay.
These guys have hit enough shots, whether that's right of target, left of target, how high it is off the ground. They have an expectation of where that golf ball should be.
And that's where, that's how they're watching these during the tournament and knowing exactly where it is and how to call, whether it's left, right, center?
Yeah, so they're going to feel where it is on the face, what their swing would have produced. And then on top of that is, we need the ball, a 7-iron, to stop softly. So there's a certain land angle that we're going to look at on the launch monitor. There's a certain peak height that we're going to look at on the launch monitor. And so we're trying to work those parameters during our fittings, as well as be something that visually that player likes to look at.
Okay. So as a rec player, as you're talking about these different things that the professional and amateurs are looking for, as a rec player, what do you recommend that we look for in a set of clubs?
So it's going to vary from throughout the set. So if we look at your irons, hybrids type scenario, a big thing what we look at with a tour player is the same for a recreational player, is you want to look a lot at your gapping and your peak heights when you're doing that. Is if I take a recreational player who has a hard time creating a lot of elevation. So one thing you want to look at is what's going to help me do that. Is it probably not playing a 620 MB? It's probably going to a T200, T300 club head that has a little lower CG that helps me elevate the golf ball. By having that ball more in the air, I'm probably going to increase my carry, but I'm also going to increase my land angle, so when I actually do hit a green, it stops. So as we take that to a 4-iron, maybe my 4-iron doesn't go quite high enough, and I can look at a TS hybrid and say, well, I'm not a hybrid player, but all of a sudden the hybrid goes higher, carries farther, and now I have a better gap from my 4 to 5-iron. So it's looking and making sure that all the clubs in your bag are a club you can hit on the golf course. I think a lot of recreational golfers have a 3-iron in their bag because that's what you order. You order 3 through pitch. Mm-hmm. And you look at a player like Webb Simpson. Webb Simpson has 5 head covers, and he's pretty good. So, for those of us that are a little pompous and say, no, I hit a 3-iron fine, Webb Simpson is taking advantage of, a 3-wood, 5-wood, and 2 hybrids, so he can hit something really high and soft into tour level greens. Okay.
So when you when we're buying clubs, are you recommending, or I guess how different are the clubs for pros and amateurs versus what we're buying off the rack from a Titleist supplier?
They're the same. So we're using the same things. So we're trying to make clubs for avid golfers. I might put a different type of shaft in it. I might do some different things in terms of lengths or lie angles or lofts and those types of things. But when you look at the expansiveness of the Titleist, TS driver line, we have a TS1, a 2, and a 3, and a 4. TS1, no one on tour is playing. It's designed for players with sub 130 ball speed. It's all about light and fast. Well, my average tour player is swinging a lot closer to 118 miles an hour and has ball speeds around 170. So 130 is obviously significant slower ball speed. Mm-hmm. So that TS1's not in play on tour, but TS2, TS3, and TS4 are. I might be putting a player in, take a Justin Thomas again, playing a 9.5 TS3 like you can buy at the store. He just has a BF 60 TX in it versus, our AV series 65 that you and I are going to be playing in an RRS. So, but from the head standpoint, it's very similar.
So you mentioned that you may consider like changing out the shaft, and I had read a little bit about that. I had listened to your podcast on Golf WRX from 2018. Great interview. I had been trying to read and understand why someone would be purchasing a different brand of shaft and a different club head, because that is not something that that you really hear a lot in the media. They're not really talking about that as much, in my opinion. So why would you choose that? And how do you decide if a Titleist shaft isn't what you want with a Titleist head, or how do you kind of build that for your players?
So on a consumer level, none of our shafts are made are Titleist shafts. We use other brands. We use our vendors that are very good at making shafts and say, hey, I'm looking for something in this profile that's going to fit our product.
Okay.
And so we're going to do the same thing at the professional level.
Got it.
Is, somebody like a Justin Thomas likes a fair amount of feel in his driver shaft. So, on paper with his club speed and how high he launches it might be a little softer to flex than certain people would think or on paper. But when Justin Thomas turned pro, he was playing a stiff flex driver, and that's what he grew up with, and he got used to a really loady feel. Adam Scott would be in the same thing. He likes a lot of load in his driver shaft and feeling like that club bends with him. So you're trying to match the head specs to the shaft that they like the feel of, and that gives them directional control. When we look at some other players, they might like something that feels really boardy and really stiff comparatively. So I'm trying to think of a good example of that. Like a Rafa Cabrera Bello tends to like something a little stiffer and more stout. He plays 100-gram part in his fairway woods, which a lot of players don't, comparatively to his club head speed.
So I'm so amazed because you're just talking about all of these different products that all of the different players have. How in the world does your brain fit all of this information?
It's actually kind of funny. I mean, I'm pretty bad with names, but I could go to a mini tour event and see a player and tell them the loft of their driver, the setting I put their driver in, and have no idea what their name is. But I can remember, I'm like, you were a 9.5 TS3 in B2, but I don't remember your name.
Right. So over 14 years in this type of industry, what are the changes that you've seen so far in your career with how players are choosing their clubs, how they're coming to the course, and kind of like you mentioned earlier with Aaron, determining different things and different things that they need in their game based on the course that they're about to play. How has that kind of shifted from 14 years ago to now?
There's a lot more technology involved, not only from the club side. I mean, when you look at a lot of for us with SureFit CG, SureFit Hosel, and the interchangeability and the customizability on the fly versus, a 909 that was a glued-in product that didn't have that as much adjustability to it, is you have that. But, with the advent of different launch monitors, we used to be the only people on the block with a launch monitor. Now 60-70% of the field will have their own individually to work on gapping, wedges, and those types of things. So a player is bringing their own technology in their backpack with them, which they used to have to come to the Titleist Performance Institute to get. So there's a lot more of that from an instructional standpoint. There's force plates. You have your team's probably a lot bigger with so many PI certified fitness instructors, as you might have a strength guy as well as a fitness person that's helping your mobility. You might have a putting coach and a swing coach who are all using, different technologies in terms of monitoring your putting stroke as well as your swing. And then you add into that the availability of ShotLink and statistics, as the players can look at very specific shots throughout the round and look at tendencies of left to right, their accuracy from different yardages, their strokes gained versus the field. And that's been a big advantage for us, is we're able to always take a snapshot of where our players are and look at ways we can help. So a lot of times before they come to us, we're already ready because we're looking at their strokes gained throughout the bag. And then if we see issues in one area, we can break those statistics out and look for areas of improvement, whether it's from club design or club fitting, to help our players.
How do you partner when you're talking about club design and club fitting? How do you partner with R&D?
So that's a part of my job. So I leave Sunday mornings to go to a PGA Tour event. I'm there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday while the players are practicing. And then on Thursdays and Fridays, I go back to the office. And so part of mine is taking feedback from those players and providing it to R&D. So R&D for Titleist, whether it's Stephanie Luttrell or Marnie in our irons team, is they have to design for everybody. They have to design for Patrick Cantlay, Justin Thomas, Adam Scott, Webb Simpson, which are different from each other in their own right, as well as you and me. And those are very different ball speeds and very different needs. The good part is, we always go with the Bob Vokey mantra that we have access to the best R&D team in the world, and that is the PGA Tour. So when I bring prototypes out from our R&D team, we have very discerning players on look, feel, sound, that we're able to take some of that information back to our R&D team and going, okay, there's this little area in here on the blend of this shape that, this player might have concerns with. Turf interaction, they're really talking a lot about this leading edge to sole design on the T100. When you look at our T100, there's a lot of feedback from Jordan Spieth. We had the number one most played iron on worldwide tours in AP2, and you're looking to make a lot of changes in the T1. So where do we push those changes? And we were able to do a ton visually with offsets, leading edge, and enhancements on the sole, as well as find areas where we can really push technology. And, when we look at tour players like Jordan Spieth and say, hey, if I can get help with my foreiron, a little more forgiveness, a little more launch, and help my gapping a little bit, I'll take it. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to put some technology in the top end of a set like that and use feedback from tour players and push it to the consumer realm.
When you're talking about all of this, how do you match then a ball to a player? Is the player choosing the type? Do you match the ball to the club? Do you match the club to the ball? Is it a certain way a player wants it to feel or play? How does the ball selection factor in?
So that's the thing. We work clubs around the golf ball. So we're very lucky at Titleist and to have the golf ball we have. But we also have the benefit is we have 40 Pitts and Jeff Byers. They actually work for Golf Ball R&D, and they travel to the PGA Tour every week, and they do what I do, but on the golf ball side. So they're taking feedback from the players and going back to the R&D department in Massachusetts to say, here's things we are looking for out of a golf ball for our players. These are the feedbacks we're getting. And so when we're doing golf ball work, a lot of times we're going to work from the hole backwards rather than, I think some people think to do driver towards the hole. So the big key there is I have so much adjustability on the driver. I have a TS2, a TS3, a TS4. I have 16 SureFit settings. I have all those shafts. So I can make the driver do a lot of things in terms of going higher, going lower, spinning more, spinning less. So if I find a golf ball that I really like the feel or sound of around the greens, okay, well now I'm already winning there. And then as we work into the wedges, are you getting the wedge performance you want? Do you like that soft feel of a Pro V1? Do you like a little firmer Pro V1X? Are you getting enough greenside performance out of it? As we back up into your irons, where's our launch spin ratios to that? Again, I can change lofts on irons fairly easily. So if I really like the feel of a Pro V1X around the greens, and as I'm backing up, I might have just a fraction too much spin on your irons. I can adjust that and get lots of good performance. So you're getting total performance out of your golf ball, not singular performance. And I think we see some people who will hop in a simulator, hit a ball on with a driver and say, oh, this ball spins less, it's better for me. Well, you're probably only hitting your driver 10 to 14 times around. Mm-hmm. You're hitting all your other clubs a lot. So your golf ball is your one piece of equipment that is on every shot throughout a round. So you got to make sure it's doing everything you want for you.
When you're talking about the adjustments that you're making to a club, what does that actually entail? How are you doing that? What does that look like? How do you know what type of adjustment physically needs to be made?
So again, it's going to vary on club to club, but the big thing what we're trying to do is the performance for that club and where it fits in your bag. So the benefit we have for a tour player is we have a really nice tour van that travels with us to every PGA Tour event. So Peter Bozook and David Southworth are two guys that have the unglorious job of moving it. You know, Peter's driving from Chicago to Atlanta as we speak, and I get to fly to Atlanta on Sunday, and he's going to pop that van out and have it all ready for us. So when we get there, you know, if we are in a situation and Adam Scott says, you know, my driver was just coming out a little flat last week, we're going to go to the driving range. We're going to hit some of his drivers. We're going to use a launch monitor. We're going to kind of look at what the club's doing as well as what the golf ball's doing. And then we can go back to the van and we're going to make adjustments to that driver, whether it's shaft, head type, CG location, setting, loft, depending on what we saw from the numbers. Then we can go right back to the range pretty quickly and test those results again. And then once those results are kind of where we want, then we're going to go to the golf course and make sure it's working on the golf course with it and see if we have to make any other adjustments.
How often is a player coming to you and saying, hey, I want to change this part of my game or how I'm playing, versus them going to you in the off season and saying, let's work on this during the off season for this next month, 2 months, whatever it is, and this is going to be the adjustment that we work on and finalize?
Same kind of answer in that it'll be player dependent. You know, the big thing for a lot of these players is, you know, it's kind of these guys don't play with an eraser. They're playing for keeps every week. Mm-hmm. So if they're having issues throughout the year, maybe it's a little physical issue and they're having to make some swing changes or their club speed's down, we want to be ready to react and get them to the best spot where they are right now. Other players like to start the year and end the year with the same equipment, and then what we'll do is as we get past the Tour Championship is we're going to have that player probably out to TPI, and we're going to spend a day or two looking at their bag, looking at where we can make them better, looking at their statistics with them, and finding ways that, you know, okay, let's look at where you had trouble is, hey, we had a little bit of a trouble outside 225 yards. You know, we're playing an MB 3-iron. Let's look at a U500 and see from a peak height or a gapping standpoint if that helps us from those types of things. So it'll vary as a player is working with their swing coaches and things that they're implementing from that standpoint, as well as, you know, sometimes we get it going the other way. A player really started to feel good physically throughout the year and their club head speed's really starting to move up as the weather gets warmer and their mobility is moving up. So then we got to really evaluate their whole bag and say, are we in the right spot?
Okay. So you mentioned, I believe you just got back, this morning from Chicago?
Last night.
Last night from Chicago, heading to Atlanta soon. What is it like traveling to these events for you?
It depends on the week. Traveling back from Liberty National and the Northern Trust was an interesting challenge with weather in the Northeast, where Aaron Dill and I got to drive 6 hours to the nearest airport we could catch a flight from.
Oh, my goodness.
You know, other events are the Farmers in San Diego, and I get to drive I-5 South, and it's a nice commute.
Yeah, I bet. When you're there, do you get to enjoy the tournament at all, or are you straight like at your tour van 12 hours a day and just grinding through the day and then kind of passing out in a hotel room until the next morning?
It's just being at the practice facilities, being available. You know, we luckily enough for us is we've had great success with our Ts driver, and we're the number one driver on tour. We've had a number of events. We've been the number one driver, fairway, hybrid, utility, iron, wedge, putter, ball, shoe, and glove all in the same week.
So you're doing okay.
it keeps our team kind of busy. There's a lot of guys to check in with and make sure they're having the best equipment they can. We've been lucky to have some successes with players like Max Homa being able to win for the first time. So on a normal week, we're getting there around, early in the morning on Monday, being able to check in with players playing on the Monday Pro-Am, players that are traveling in Monday morning, coming out to the course Monday afternoon, repeat that on Tuesday. Tuesday tends to be your busiest day on tour because a lot of guys might take Monday off as a little recovery day. Mm-hmm. And then Tuesday is a big practice day for players. So if they're going to make any adjustments or tweaks, Tuesday we spend is normally very busy. And then Wednesday's Pro-Am day. So again, you're there early, trying to see guys before they go out in the Pro-Am, see if they need to make any adjustments before they're out there, or they might have saw stuff on the golf course. We have some players that might say, hey, there's a par 3 this week that's 240. I don't have a good club for that. Can we take a look at my bag and say, here's an opportunity. I might be able to remove a different club, and can we look at a TS hybrid or something just for the week to be able to handle this one golf hole?
When they do that, are they just so comfortable with the clubs that you've provided them and they've had enough practice with all of these different clubs that it's not a major shift for them to try a new club in their bag for one hole for 1 week?
There's not a lot of that going on. Again, we really try to make sure our guys are prepared for any course in front of them. But along the same lines is a big part of what we do. Is our goal is to understand our player, their comfort, what they like, what they don't like, is to, as quickly as possible, get them a golf club that's going to help them win a golf tournament and compete. All the players on the PGA Tour are incredibly talented. If you haven't been to a tour event, it's actually really kind of fun to watch them during a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday practice round because they're a little bit more relaxed. But to see some of the golf shots these guys can hit, one of my early stories of being exposed on tour is I was walking 9 holes with Jeff Ogilvy, and we were talking about equipment, and we got to 9. I kind of looked at Jeff and go, do you realize you birdied 8 of the 9 holes? And he's like, oh, that was fun. He didn't even notice. So when the crowd's not around and their greens aren't quite as fast, the skill level of these guys are out of this world. And so anything you can do to give them a little edge is really important.
So you talked about Max Homa and him getting his first win. Did you make adjustments that week based on things, or had you been making adjustments for him and then kind of saw it all come together?
So Max would be a perfect example of kind of in both camps. He would prefer to do more of his work at home away from a tournament. His job at the tournament is preparation. So he'd rather do his work at home or at our test facility. He's there to prepare for the tournament. I can't remember the exact timing right offhand, but a few weeks prior to that, we had introduced the Ts4 Driver, which was kind of made for someone like Max. His launch tends to be a little low, his spin tends to be a little high, and he likes to work the ball left to right. So there was a situation where Max normally wouldn't make a change, but hey, we have this new driver that's really going to fit kind of you exactly.
Yeah.
Max put that driver in play, and then a few weeks later, he won the golf tournament with Ts4, being the first worldwide win with Ts4. So, you're not always trying to make a change in an event, but if the opportunity presents itself where you can make yourself better, you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you've mentioned the Titleist Performance Institute a couple of times, TPI. Tell us about what that is and what kind of the goal is and what happens with the players there.
So it's a kind of an all-inclusive facility. We do a lot of things there. It's partially an R&D facility. It's an area for us in our R&D department to test prototypes of golf balls, prototypes of golf clubs, and things like that. It's an area for us to fit consumers as well, but it's also an area for us to be able to work with our tour players away from a tournament. There's a lot of demands on a PGA Tour player from sponsors, media requests, as well as their own personal time and families and golf course preparation at a tournament site. So a lot of times to work on their equipment there, it is difficult for them to commit that time frame to us. So having a facility like TPI allows us access to a lot of fitting materials, as well as removal of a lot of distraction. So we can have a player out there and be able to spend a day. It's relaxed. We're in shorts. We're in San Diego, so the weather's normally pretty good.
Yeah.
Our test facility is about 3 miles from the ocean. When Rafa comes out, he can surf if the waves are good in the morning, and come out and get a little session in, and we can double check all his equipment. That was the exciting thing we were able to do with him this year, is he was able to come out here, get a little surfing in, come to the test site in the afternoon. We were able to work on the 620 MBs with him, really make sure they were dialed in, double check lofts, lies, all of his numbers, make sure they were spot on. And then he was able to put them in the next week before the U.S. Open at Pebble, and he's having a great year with them. So, we're able to take advantage of those facilities and remove some of the distractions and the pressure that is preparation for a big event, so that when they're at an event, the goal is on-course preparation, working with their caddy, working on yardages, making sure their swing's dialed in, and knowing that everything they have is good to go.
So did you go surfing with him?
I did not. Luckily, I'm smart enough to not compete with somebody who's surfed with Kelly Slater and the likes.
Are you a surfer?
I tried when I moved out here. It turns out I'm not very good at it.
You didn't pick that up from your time in New York? That wasn't a thing?
Yeah, upstate New York doesn't have a lot of that surfing.
Not water surfing, anyway.
Yeah.
That's funny. My husband grew up snowboarding and skiing, and I grew up on water skis. And so we went skiing one time together. That will be the last time that I hit a slope. I do not understand putting on all those clothes and freezing. And he's like, "You were so good." I'm like, "Yeah, no, that was not my jam. I grew up on a lake."
Yeah, waves and saltwater definitely bring a different component to the whole, standing on a moving object thing.
Right. So you did mention that you fit consumers at TPI. So anyone can go in there essentially like off the street and get fitted in a similar way that the players are getting fitted.
Absolutely. So it's one of those things that, we're very lucky to have a facility of that size where, we're able to have, Rafa out at the same time where we're having a consumer get fit for the same product. So, I'm going to reach into the bag and pull out a 620 MB for Rafa, where somebody might be pulling a T300 for the person 2 stalls down from us with a consumer.
Okay, that's awesome. So Scott Hamilton was actually the one that introduced us, and he speaks very highly of you, which says a lot, because I think he's pretty specific on who he's endorsing. But he talked about you being the best club builder on tour for Titleist. How did that come about? I mean, what did you do? How did you prepare? How did you continue to learn to be considered one of the top club builders on tour?
Well, that's very nice of Scott to say. I mean, luckily for me, as I'm surrounded by a lot of great people, and sometimes you look better when you're surrounded by great people. And Scott's part of that great part. He works with a lot of our players, and the biggest thing I've learned is if you listen to smart people and just repeat what they say, you sound really smart. So when Bob Vokey's talking about wedges, just listen and then just tell the person the next time you see him the same things Bob did. But no, I've been really lucky to be around people like Bob Vokey and Aaron Dill. Our R&D department has incredibly talented people in it, and being able to spend time with them and really understand what a golf club does. And then you spend a lot of years listening, when Adam Scott is talking about how a golf ball feels when it leaves the club face. Don't talk over them, just take a lot of notes and listen. And then when other players that might not have the feel Adam is, you're able to ask questions and get them to the same spot or see what they want. And then at the same time, you got to listen to Scott Hamilton's of the world on what is he teaching players to do, and how from a club fitter standpoint, can I help his players?
Mm-hmm.
And realize that that's the direction they're going, and going, okay, I see where they're going, the ball flight they're trying to do, where our impact locations are drifting to, where his attack angles are going with that. Okay, here's how we can make those work and marry those together. And I think that's the big part with our Titleist Tour teams across all around the world is, when Liam McDougall's with the team in Europe is, he's making sure that, Lucas Biergarten and his team are all on the same page, and being part of that team and listening to the instructors and working back and forth of, okay, I'm going to go this way and here's why, and them going, okay, I understand that, and being part of it is you can get a lot of those pieces to marry together. So I think from all those standpoints and just taking advantages of all the resources you have around you and people who are incredibly smart like Scott, who will try to trick you in making him think he's a good old country boy.
Oh, he plays that card well.
Yeah, he plays that a little too hard, and then you start asking him about pressure shifts and pelvic tilts and things like that, and he starts spouting numbers, and you realize he's got a lot more going than that.
Right. He his episode, there's a part, and I'm like, he goes through this whole thing, and then right at the end, he just puts it in very plain English, and I was like, well, thank you for the translation, because I have no idea what you just said. Like, I'm lost.
Yep. It's part of why he's really, really good at what he does.
That's so funny. I love it. So, something that has been on, that has gotten a lot of media attention, and I know you've been interviewed on this before, so I wanted to just get some thoughts and feedback here. So when Xander at the Open had some issues with his driver, first of all, I think there's a lot of issues there on why is it that they only choose certain people and not others and all of that stuff. But can you talk to us about characteristic time, or CT, and what that is, first of all, why it's important, why they're measuring it?
So characteristic time is a test developed by the RNA and the USGA to be a substitute for COR. COR was always the standard of 0.83, and this is how fast a ball can leave the club face. And it was a way for them to limit the speed of a club face. CT is a little bit less obtrusive test in that it's more mobile, and as opposed to a big cannon shooting a golf ball at the club face. So the CT, the characteristic time, is something developed by the RNA and the USGA on also known as a pendulum test. Okay. It's a metal pendulum that bounces off the club face and is measuring the time the pendulum's in contact with the face, as well as the velocity that it is leaving the face, and then providing you a number, and they correlated those numbers to COR and developed limits with that.
So what is the goal? Why are there limits, and why do the RNA and USGA want to set limits on club head speed?
So it's not club speed. It's,
or not club speed, I'm
sorry. Ball speed
yeah.
leading the club face of the driver. And so it's just one way to try to limit distance a little bit in saying, okay, the faster that ball leaves the face, the farther it's going to travel down course. So by limiting how fast the driver face is, think of a trampoline. If I make a trampoline that allows me to jump higher, that's that golf ball leaving the face faster and going farther.
Okay. So you had done an interview after the Open where you talked about testing Justin Thomas's clubs, and you were concerned about them. I think it was like right before the Scottish and right before the Open Championship. You were concerned about them because of CT and that the face would crack. Why were you concerned about them for the CT? And then was the face cracking something separate that you just kind of noticed, or do those things tend to come in conjunction with each other?
So that was actually Justin Thomas just talking on his own, as opposed to me saying any of that.
Oh, okay. Because he had said what you had told him before the tournament. Yep.
So, yeah, the big thing there is we always want to make sure our Titleist players are playing with the best equipment they can. Kind of goes back to the theme throughout this whole discussion. So we're always going to monitor our players' equipment and make sure they not only have the best, but as well as product that adheres to the rules of golf.
Okay. Why? What would cause? Is it just overplaying that causes the face to crack?
Yeah, these guys, again, if you haven't been to a tour event, I highly suggest it. They swing really fast. That club's moving at a high rate of speed. They're hitting it in the same spot a lot compared to you and I. And they tend to hit a lot more golf balls than you and I. So when you think of the number of times you or I might go to the driving range and hit a couple drivers maybe before we warm up to go play, versus these players that eventually over time a player may see a crack in it, over extended use. But
Got it.
It's not all that common, but it's occasionally we see. And again, you got to think the volumes of times that you and I are hitting a driver and the speed we're hitting it, and we're taking advantage of the entire club face as opposed to some of these players that are hitting in very specific spots time and time again.
Yeah, absolutely. JT had said that he had used that driver for a while, and I was just kind of wondering what a while meant in pro terms.
A while can mean a lot. Steve Stricker's used his driver a while, as in 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
I think in Justin's cases, he had that for since the launch of TS, or nearly the launch of TS. So from that standpoint. JT had also said that testing should be done more frequently, like with the manufacturers. Is that something that you handle when they're coming to you Monday through Wednesday before the tournament starts? Yeah, again, our big goal is to always make sure the time the bell rings with all of our players is make sure everything is set and they have no worries in their equipment no matter what. So we're always going to do whatever we can to make sure, Justin Thomas, a perfect example this week is, just making sure everything's set. We did his loft lies this week. He knows that nothing's going to be off in my equipment come the time the bell rings on Thursday, and he can go out. And this week at the BMW, he's leading after round 1. That's our big goal of being there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, is to make sure that all of our players have everything they need to compete at the highest levels.
Yeah, I saw an interview or a quote from him right before we started chatting, and he was like, I had the worst warm-up of my career. And I'm like, oh, worst warm-up of your career, and you're in the lead. That must be a really bad day.
Yeah, it's the standards these guys have are always pretty high, and again, it's always funny. Sometimes their feels change throughout a round or a day or a week, and JT is one of those guys. I mean, it's so impressive to watch him hit balls and be able to work with him. That his level of standard is. And it's funny, if you saw any of the videos of him swinging left-handed, he's now on a kick of, we were chatting the other day on what specs his left-handed clubs should probably be, because he's, got to get that dialed in and make sure he's the best he possibly can be. Right. Left-handed as well as right-handed. So.
Oh my goodness, that's funny. What is your favorite thing about working on the tour?
It's a pretty special time to be able to work with players of that caliber. To see small changes have such a big effect on ball flight and things like that, and to work at the highest level of kind of any in any industry or sport or things like that. It's pretty exciting. I mean, it's stressful because anytime you implement a change, I can. Thursdays through Sundays, I'm in my phone a lot, living and dying with every birdie and bogey. You realize you're such a small part of their success and how much their skill is taking over, but you really think about these guys' games a lot. I mean, it's awkward the number of times I'm sitting around looking into space, just kind of wondering about specs or things I would change, or so-and-so's ball flight and things like that.
What do you think Ben Hogan's game would be like with today's technology?
Having never met Mr. Hogan,
right?
It's a little tougher, but I'd imagine, it'd be interesting on just, things that he was doing at that time to his own equipment to match his swing, where, Now with motion capture and things like that, we might get them to a solution a little bit faster, and other ways that we're able to manipulate clubs today versus back then. It's also a very different game. These guys are incredibly powerful. Green speeds are significantly faster. Greens are firmer. The ball flight that these guys need today versus then. I got to imagine he'd still be really, really good.
Yeah.
And we'd probably see some scary number of greens and regs hit.
Right. So we had a handful of listener questions come in too. So the first one, how much of a difference does shifting weights in a driver head actually matter? And as a rec player, is there anything that we would be doing to help set ourselves up correctly with this, or be potentially causing more damage for not doing it correctly?
So the biggest things you can look at is ball flight and impact location. So let's say you're a player who constantly hits the ball on the heel, and you're looking at a Ts4 driver. So the beauty of a driver like that is you do have the sure fit weight availability, so you have the ability to put it neutral in the heel or in the toe. So that might be a situation where if you move that ball into the heel, we're going to get a little bit more dynamic closure, which will probably help move you off the heel a little bit. And then when you do miss it on the heel, you have a little bit more weight there to help support that miss in terms of ball speed and direction. Now, if you're a player who loves to cut the ball and you like playing a fade and your miss is a little on the heel, that might not be the best situation in terms of where that weight is. And again, with the Ts4, you have the beauty of you also have sure fit hosel to try to help you as well. The good part is what we have in Ts2 is if you're just a golfer that I just would like a driver to be really fast and really straight, is you can take Ts2 that doesn't have movable weight, has sure fit hosel, so I can add loft, take loft off, move it upright, move it flat. I can just get a really high MOI, really fast, really forgiving driver and just hit it. If you really are trying to fine tune, that Ts4 just gives you so many options to really get your launch spin, speed, and direction really, really tuned up.
Okay. The next one was, why are shafts so expensive?
That was probably be a better question for shaft companies.
Okay.
They can, there's so many great people in the shaft industry. We'll have to hook you up with one or two of them. I think you could get down some really fun rabbit holes with them in R&D design and how they're pitching. And I think that's the thing with all technology now in golf is where's the limit and what can I do from materials and technology and everything else to push it. And some of the high-end materials some of these shaft companies are using now for increased stability but lower weight is they're always trying to experiment with what's next, what's out there, how far can we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that'd be a really interesting rabbit hole to go down. How long will a set of wedges or a driver perform at their highest degree before needing to be replaced for a rec player?
So a lot of it's just going to be on where you play and how often you play. Aaron Dill tells a lot of our players to use a 4-3-2-1 scenario. They're going to replace their pitching wedge every year, their gap wedge twice a year, their sand wedge 3 times a year, and their lob wedge 4 times a year. So the big thing is there's actually some really cool videos on Titleist.com and Vokey.com on showing you what the average recreational player on how when that group does wear out, how much it's affecting your play. And I think a lot of us would look in our bags and look at that wedge that's 2-3 years old and go, it's fine. I'd highly encourage you to go get fit with someone from Titleist and hit a new Vokey and go, okay, so when I hitting that pitch shot that runs over the back, if I just gave myself a better bounce and a fresh grooves, that ball stopping next to the hole, that's a lot more of an enjoyable round getting up and down rather than pulling wedge twice. So I think it's definitely something the average golfer doesn't pay enough attention to.
Yeah, I'm sure of that. And I can't wait for my husband to listen to this episode and tell me that he needs to go get new clubs because he's already been telling me that. So I have no hope right now.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
I am in trouble. Well, JJ, thank you so much. Are you ready to play a quick 9?
Sounds great.
Awesome. All right. Favorite club in the bag?
Driver.
Favorite memory in golf?
I'll say this year we're working the Open Championship for the first time.
Oh, okay. What is a bucket list course for you to play?
Pebble Beach.
Do you actually, and actually I'm going to go on a side tangent, do you actually play very much? I mean, do you have much time to play?
I don't. Occasionally during the summer months, when the sun's out a little longer, we'll sneak out on Monday night after work, play that 9 holes at 6:30. See how fast we can get around on the road. But my road set gets more work than my home set.
Walk or ride, of course.
Walk.
Favorite tournament to attend?
The Masters.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Road trip or frequent flyer?
Prefer road trip, but I am significantly more a frequent flyer.
Yeah, you definitely are. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Would you rather vacation at a lake, an ocean, or I guess since you're from upstate New York, a mountainside?
A mountainside.
And what would be your drink of choice?
I don't mind a bourbon now and then.
Oh, okay. Any special kinds?
I enjoy sampling different flavors wherever we are and sharing them with people.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, JJ, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited to introduce you to our listeners and can't wait to hopefully meet you on a tour someday soon. I have personally only been to Thursday through Sunday rounds, so I will definitely be putting it on my list to make it to a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday so that I can hang out with you and Scott and see what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I think it'll be an eye-opening and kind of seeing some of the things behind the scenes and how much prep these players put in. It'd be really interesting for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds great.
Thanks. Thanks for joining me this week. Let's continue the conversation online. You can find me at Golfish Podcast or at Ms. Amy Goodman on Instagram. See you next week.